Denver Broncos are moving on from one of my favorite players ever, and it's a sad time here for Sports Talk Denver, but a great time for the Denver Broncos because if you're moving on from a player I loved and the fans loved, that means Sean Payton thinks that better is in store for these Broncos. It also clears way for young talent. We're going to break that down and a ton more in this video. If you're new to the channel, I'm Ben. This is Sports Talk Denver. All offseason, I've hyped myself up on every single one of these 90 players and talking myself into how we have 90 Pro Bowlers on this team. I know that's not actually possible. And, you know, all offseason, you use cute terms like, oh, is this player on the bubble or are they in? And now you hear like they're cut or moving on from them, and it gets brutal. But we know in Denver right now, like the future is very bright, and the fact that we're moving on from players that we like a Justin Simmons and a couple of the players we're going to go through now shows that Sean Payton really does have his sight on a young team who is hungry and ready to get us to the next step. So diving into it just right off the bat, the most brutal news that we are hearing is that Tim Patrick, who has fought back from injury all the way back to when he was in Utah Ute, having that catastrophic leg injury where his bone broke through and he came back and switched numbers. We had a lot of high hopes. You know, the first two targets of the games he was playing in, he was targeted. And it turns out that as you were breaking down how the Denver Broncos were going to get all of the receivers, you know, onto this roster, knowing that last year they only carried 4 receivers on that 53-man roster, you really got to a point where you were choosing between Tim Patrick and Devon Vele or Troy Franklin. And so you see here that the Denver Broncos announced today, with all of the depth, all the talent that we have at wideout, we are moving on from Tim Patrick. He will either be cut, and my guess is he is going to get picked up. I could see a world where he gets reunited with Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who we know wanted Ayuk and had been rumored in going after CeeDee Lamb and all those others. So we are exploring some trade possibilities for what we could get for Tim Patrick, who just greatly outperformed all expectations of him. Just an amazing team guy to fight through injuries in training camp 2 years in a row, to be healthy as the season starts and then get cut. This is absolutely brutal. But I think the good news, as I'm looking at silver linings, is I heard multiple projections of our 53-man roster, all which left Devon Vele off of the 53. And I think the upside and the 5-year possibilities with Devon Vele are way better than the 5-year possibility with Tim Patrick, knowing his injury history and just knowing his age. But like, that's huge news of the day. Other huge news of the day is that the other position that we are totally loaded at is running back room, where you got locks in Javonte Williams is a lock, Audric Estime is a lock, Jalil's a lock. You're already at 3, and that is a crowded room, and we're still talking about Watson and Beatty, who played out of their minds in training camp and in the preseason. And so the question was like, well, Samaje, he was Russell Wilson's safety blanket. We wouldn't have had that 5-game winning streak last year without him. And the Denver Broncos are moving on from Samaje as well. And so as you just look here, that what is the term that Sean Payton has used to describe this Broncos team over and over? It is young and hungry, and we see that youth and that hunger move on into how we are building our roster. I think no better thing can define the future trajectory of this Denver Broncos team, as dudes that we are going to cut will be playing on Sundays and on other teams. And I think right there, you have 2 right there. I do this roundtable once a week, and I talked about how the Broncos have a ton of talent that will be playing on other teams, and they laughed at me. And right there, we have 2 players who Sean Payton said wasn't good enough for this team, and they're going to be playing on other teams, and that is a cold, hard fact. You will see Tim Patrick again, and you will see Samaje Perine again. You just will not see them again in Denver Broncos uniforms. Other big things that are official as of now, and I'm refreshing this page because we have until 4 p.m. tomorrow to make all of the cuts. We know that the only specialist position that Sean Payton brought in to challenge Will Lutz is a lock, and he didn't even have another challenger there. But we did have a little punting competition going, and Bo Nix made the punting competition even more difficult because he never had to kick the ball when he had the one fumble from Lucas Kroll. Otherwise, Bo Nix scored on every one of his possessions. So it wasn't really until yesterday that we got to see the punter competition, and so this is kind of surprising because what we saw was Trenton Gill has a massive cannon leg. Yesterday, he had a 73-yard punt that rolled into the end zone, but you're talking, that's a lot of air yards. And then we saw him, I think his furthest one that actually got downed was like a 60-something yarder, but he also had a couple shanks and a couple really, really bad punts. And so we are going with, we could have saved a little money by going with Trenton Gill, but instead we're sticking with Riley Dixon. And then none of these other cuts that have been made so far are that surprising whatsoever. The big question truly is how many quarterbacks are we going to carry on this roster? We know Bo Nix is the starter, and we know that Zach Wilson has a much higher ceiling. If something were to happen with Bo Nix and we just needed a replacement for one game, I would pick Jarrett Stidham. But if Bo Nix, knock on wood, tears his ACL game 1, I don't feel great about Jarrett Stidham playing 16 extra games. And so I would prefer to reset and see what Zach Wilson has. So if you're talking just a pure backup, I would prefer Jarrett Stidham. But if you talk about who you want to run this team for the rest of the year, I'd prefer a reset with Zach Wilson. I think it is a big mistake to go and have three quarterbacks on this roster, because it means you're making cuts like Tim Patrick or Samaje Perine, guys who've shown that they can perform. Now, in Broncos country, there's been a lot of talk around Jarrett Stidham's conversation yesterday after the game, where they asked him about how he was feeling, and he kind of came off as if he wasn't supporting Bo Nix or as if he deserved the job, and it rubbed a lot of people in Broncos country the wrong way. But one of the things that I saw that I thought was awesome was that just immediately after that, I think once he saw how the national media and even local media picked that up and kind of ran with it, there was a split Twitter screen of seeing Zach Wilson just really praising Bo Nix and talking about how excited he was for it, with the salty part of Jarrett Stidham's convo. And so it made him seem as if he wasn't a team dude. And I love that immediately he gets back and sees that, and he puts this out on his Instagram, that it's iron sharpening iron. I'm excited about what we're building with these two and this team. So I love that Jarrett Stidham is more of a team guy than some of those comments would make you think. And that this Instagram post is a lot more in line with Jarrett Stidham's character that we've seen throughout the 2 years of him being here than just those isolated comments taken out of context. So seeing that. So then last night we saw Sean Payton talk up a lot about Zach Wilson, and basically 72 hours before the cut deadline comes, Sean Payton last night came out and said, I'm planning on carrying all three of these quarterbacks on the roster. And to me, we know Sean Payton is the master of using the media and only telling the media things that helps him get to his end goal. So we remember him talking up J.J. McCarthy so that the Minnesota Vikings would draft him, and we'd be able to have Bo Nix fall to us. And we've seen that time and time again, that he's very, very careful with his words. So I think the reason that he was talking up Zach Wilson so much and talking about how confident he is in all three of these quarterbacks is that we know Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson would be a major upgrade to what they have in Vegas, would be a major upgrade to the backup situation that they have with the Chargers, that they have with Trey Lance and the Dallas Cowboys. So if you are a playoff team pushing for the playoffs, Green Bay Packers, we saw how atrocious their backups were. Could we end up getting a 4th or 5th round pick for one of those guys, and then by doing so free up space to carry more wide out talent so we don't have to part with a Devon Vele? It's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of these cutdowns go. We're going to keep you all in tune to it here so you do not miss a single beat. Either way, this is a sad day in Broncos country because we're moving on from Tim Patrick, but it's a new era, an era that we can all believe in. Ooh, 2 days in a row